It's a brand new week in Kansas City, but there is no Orlando Brown. How do they deal with it? What comes of it today on Locked On Chiefs?
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back, everybody. It's Locked On Chiefs, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for free on every platform that we find. Hope that you're enjoying this. Orlando isn't out of the picture. He's just on hold is the way that I'm going to put that. We're going to talk about everything you need to know about what this means for this team as they get ready to start training camp at the end of this week. I'm Ryan Tracy, the founder of Rogue Analytics and Performance Consulting, as well as NFL33.com and RogueAPC.com and RGR Football. So we have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, and I'm Chris Clark from Chiefs Corner, and I'm actually going to have an article about this Brown situation here probably tomorrow morning would be my guess. A little bit to talk about there. Like I said, you can find me over at Chiefs Corner. It's going to be picking up over the next couple of weeks because training camp is finally here, so we now have something more to write about and to talk about.
Yeah.
I just want to start off and say, first off, I'm kind of shocked that it didn't get done. I know that people were starting to say they didn't think it'd get done, you know, the national talking heads. I just never bought into that, I guess. I figured that the player would look at the money and say, okay, we'll take the money and you know, be okay with it. But he's betting on himself. And the bigger problem that I have with all of this is there's just so much uncertainty as to whether or not he's even going to show up for camp and whether or not he'll show up for the regular season.
See, there's two separate issues for me. Yes, he's betting on himself in that he's not going to take what he feels is a lesser contract. I think the Chiefs actually offered him too much in terms of APY. We understand that it was higher than Trent Williams' APY. Now, the caveat is the structure of it was what we've talked about in that it was Chiefs friendly. It was upfront. There was certainly a departure year in what was a 6-year offer. That basically made it a 3-year deal. So he would have an opportunity to get back on the market at 29. Exactly what we talked about last week. Now, I think what you're seeing there is that the agent understood that that's window dressing, and good for him. Clearly, he's a little more advanced than a first-time agent normally. But I think really sticking to you think you should be paid as though you're the top tackle when you're not even close, I think that's going to be problematic. So it splits it into two things. A, this negotiation is over. There's nothing else that they can do. Bet on yourself for next year. Great. But this talk of sitting out the season is ridiculous. We know that he can't afford to do that. Not only financially, because he's still playing on a rookie contract. And it's just this tag. If you don't actually come in and make game checks, you're hurting yourself more than anything else. But it's also about the fact
he'll never get that money back if he sits out.
Exactly. It's down the drain. And the bigger thing for me is that he doesn't have an opportunity to continue to improve his game so they can get that kind of level, whether it's from the Chiefs or someone else next season. So I think they're two disparate things. I'm fine with the hey, we're going to not come into camp on time because that's a negotiating tactic. Not playing ball games is a completely different thing. And if he ends up holding out for a ball game, then I have to start to feel that this agent is taking him down a completely incorrect path that is not good for not only his future, but for him long-term in this city, in this league.
Definitely in the city. I don't know about for him personally or for in the league. Somebody is going to give him a chance to play, whether or not Kansas City is the team that ends up doing that. Somebody will give him an opportunity. So I'll play devil's advocate for a moment and go from the player side. And I'll just say that from his perspective, he's trying to get as much money as he possibly can.
Yep.
And I completely understand where he was coming from in the aspect of this is the only thing I can really threaten them with is that I'm not going to play. I'm not going to show up. So you absolutely have to do that. Now the question becomes, do you actually show up? Because the reality is for him, and this is my opinion, but I would think he would have to look at it and say he would agree with it. From his point of view, the only way he gets a better contract is playing better. The only way to play better is to get there and be with your team and be there from day one and work with your offensive line mates, work with the team, show them that you're a better player than you showed last season, and then you can get a better contract.
Yeah.
But the problem is if you hold out you're basically screwing yourself twice because one, you're never getting that money back. And two, if you actually do end up reporting, which there is a possibility that while I think it's very, very, very slim, there is a possibility that he could not play at all in 2022.
Yeah.
That's not going to help him next year with any team or the Chiefs.
Absolutely.
But it has happened before in the NFL, so I can't say it wouldn't happen. But he'd be foregoing a ton of money to do that. The key here, though, is in his situation, he needs to show he's a better player. The only way to do that is by playing games. And if you hold out into the regular season, you're only hurting yourself because you're going to be worse when you start the season than when you finish, regardless of when you show up.
Yeah.
And I really think that if he showed up at camp day one, he could be a very good offensive tackle, and maybe he cuts his sacks in half. Maybe he cuts his pressures in half. That lost weight is going to go a long way, but it's only going to matter if you play the season.
Well, and I'll go a step farther. If he comes into camp and he is lighter and he is able to up his level of performance, he may earn the contract that he is demanding.
Absolutely.
So, hey,
yeah,
it's worth the effort for certain. So we got to talk about the financial impact, what it means, what are the conditions, and then what do they do in the meantime? When you have preseason games you have to play at the very least, and you may have regular season you have to play without him. We'll get to that in a minute because everybody needs a little bit of extra to help get through this process. If you need a little bit of extra, which level with me, you guys always do. I always do. There's a spot that can help you, and it's Dave. You want to check out the new app from Dave. That's DAVE. It's a banking application that will let you get $500 instantly with extra cash. It fills your tank. It buys a wedding gift. It catches you up on bills. It does everything that you need it to do right now. And you can finally tackle those expenses that maybe are stressing you out or holding things up in where you're going and what you're doing, maybe getting to training camp. Millions of people have already downloaded Dave and gotten the financial relief that they need with extra cash. So if you're in a pinch, you need some help, download Dave and think of it as a helping hand for the future you. I think it's worth it. Download the Dave app from the App Store right now. That's DAVE. Sign up for the extra cash account. And you get $500 instantly. For terms and conditions, you got to go to dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees apply, and banking is provided by Evolve, a member FDIC.
Compensated spokesperson advances up to $500 are available to new members with extra cash accounts, subject to availability and approval. Terms and express fees apply. See dave.com/legal for details. Designed by Dave, not a bank. Evolve Bank and Trust, member FDIC, holds all deposits and issues the Dave debit card pursuant to a license from MasterCard.
Speaking of MasterCard and finances, maybe you can walk us through the specifics of this decision. Now that negotiations off the table, Orlando Brown can only play for the Chiefs and he can only play on the franchise tag once he signs it. But in the meantime, he can't be fined because he's not under contract. He can't work out the facility. Right.
I just want to say this real quick. He would have to sign his franchise tender for him to be subject to fines. So You're correct. He can't. I just want to specify that because that is a little bit of a caveat. Yeah,
and that's what I'm trying to get to. Run us through it. What are the implications, both what he can do and what he can't do, and what the dollars and cents are that really are going to feed into this whole decision about when he reports?
Well, the biggest thing is he's not under any contract at all whatsoever. He has not signed his franchise tender. And it's a little bit of a bad scenario for him. This would never happen, in my opinion, because I can't imagine the negotiations with that bad that the Kansas City would want to do it. But he is in a situation where Kansas City could rescind the tag, I believe, and he's just a free agent at this point. Again, don't expect that to happen. Don't think it will happen. But that is, in theory, possible. The only reason you would sign the tender is to make sure that they can't do that. But until the tender is signed, they're able to rescind that tender, and he's able to be possibly a free agent. But it doesn't sound like negotiations went that horribly. He still wants to be here. He still wants to play in Kansas City, and they still want him. So the implication at this point is he has to decide when he's going to show up. He is not under contract. He does not have to show up for training camp because he's not under any contract or any tag. So the question becomes is when is he going to show up? He loses a game check, and I'm just going to make it easy mental math here. Basically $1 million a game for each game he misses in the regular season. His tag is 16.62. There's 17 games. It's a 17-game. Actually, there's 18, so it's a little bit less than that because I think you get paid for the bye week as well. So there'd be 18 weeks that it would be divisible in, or maybe it's just 17. I'd have to double check on that, but it's going to be about $1 million a game is what it comes down to. If he sits out, that's the big thing. He'd be losing about $1 million a game. The big question is if he does sit out, how long does he sit out? Because there's nothing to gain for him from a perspective of playing at any time other than week 10. Week 10, if he is not on the roster, he has not signed his tag, he hasn't shown up yet, he is not eligible for an accrued season with the NFL. That could become a factor down the road. Probably not going to be a big deal for him, but because offensive linemen usually play a little bit longer than some of the other guys, and while he is not elite, he plays a premier position, and he is going to be able to play in the league for several more seasons at least.
Yeah, and that accrual makes a lot of sense. But also, if you don't sign the tag by week 10, you're effectively done for the year, correct?
Yep.
That's the big thing. And so, that's worst case scenario is he's staring down the barrel of not accruing a season, not playing at all, not getting paid at all. Now, this is a guy that is playing on his rookie contract.
$6 million is what he's made.
I was just going to say, he's made a few $1 million. If he's been smart financially and invested that and he's got a nest egg, he could tread water through a year. That's not that difficult. I don't know what his spending habits are, but that's besides the point. It is possible. Is it smart? No, because while he's not a running back, you can ask Lev Bell how it worked out for him. When you're in your prime of your NFL career, holding out a season, unless there's some kind of medical reason, doesn't help you. It only shortens the longevity of your earning potential in this league. So for him, he's got to get into camp. He's got to play this season. The question becomes when is it effective? Because if he shows up, after they break training camp, which is, before the second preseason game, if he shows up for practice of week 1, the Kansas City Chiefs coaching staff cannot let him play week 1 without any practice to that point. So
and probably week 2.
Yeah, I would argue that as well. We know that Andy will probably push things a little bit, maybe, but
it's a short week in week 2, so I don't think he'd be able to play until week 3.
I agree. So it's really got to come down to he has to be in there, I think, before training camp breaks in order to be ready to play week 1. If he can't play week 1, obviously he misses the game check, et cetera, et cetera. So I think what we can expect is he's not going to be there on the 26th, which is when veterans report to training camp. He could be there sometime before August 18th, which is when they break training camp. So you got a couple weeks there. You got 3 weeks, Orlando. What are you going to do? I think it has to be something in training camp.
I think he shows up day 1.
You do?
If he's smart and he wants the best paycheck he can possibly get, he has to show up and he has to be there early. Yep. It doesn't matter that he missed OTAs. It doesn't really matter that he missed all of that mandatory mini camp and all that stuff. It doesn't really matter that. But when the pads come on and you're not the person that's there getting snaps and they can't see what you're able to do on the field, they have no idea what they have right now. Yeah. I mean, they know what they had last year. They don't know what he's going to be like 20 pounds lighter and what he's going to be able to do and what he can't, what he still can't. So they've got to be able to figure that out. And he has to get ready for the season. And I understand what you're saying. It only takes a couple weeks to get ready for the season. But if you're trying to maximize your contract, you want to be as ready as you can be for that. And to do that, you need to be there day 1. Yeah. And I was proven wrong on the fact that I thought he'd get a deal done. He didn't do that, so I very well could be wrong. He could not be there on the day that they report to camp. If he does that, then that shows that his decision-making is more of, you didn't give me a contract, so I'm not going to be there, and I'm not, maybe I'll show up later, and he's going to struggle with that. And I think the issue I would have from that is it sure seemed like he started his career going to the combine and not ready for the combine. And it cost him horribly.
It did.
And if he's going to continue to make those same types of mistakes business-wise, that's going to make you pause when you're thinking about giving him a long-term deal.
Well, and I'll tell you this. I'd argue he's still a little bit behind the curve because he didn't prepare for that draft and he didn't train well. I think that changes your whole perspective, the whole course of your career, certainly through the first 4-year contract. But now we see him again playing catch up. Didn't have an agent going through the beginning of this offseason period. Couldn't make the decision until he had an agent. I don't know if he toyed with representing himself or whatever, but good for him for not making that decision. I'll tell you that, Orlando. But it seems like everything is just a little bit behind. And we all know that he rows the boat to his own cadence, but at some point you got to get caught up because the NFL is not friendly to outliers. It is not copacetic to get what you're looking for in terms of your earnings, et cetera. So
unless you're an absolutely elite player.
True.
And then you're able to basically write whatever you want. But everything that I keep hearing from his uncle, it doesn't seem like he's getting good advice, or at least his uncle is saying the right things in the media. Personally, I would think that if I was Orlando Brown, I wouldn't want my uncle going out there and saying half the stuff that he's gone out there and said, because it makes the situation more difficult. Because at that point, you're kind of out there and saying, I have to be the highest paid tackle in the NFL, and if I'm not, then I'm not going to play. Okay, well, now he has to kind of stand to that because that's what his uncle said.
Right. But your money where your mouth is.
Or have egg on his face, taking less.
Yeah, that's absolutely it. So what does the egg on the face do? What's next? How do the Chiefs deal with it? What actually could happen? I want to revisit a topic that you mentioned earlier, but we'll do that coming up next.
And I'm going to tell you about our friends over at Built Bar. You absolutely need to check these out. If you have not already, these are absolutely delicious. I actually just got a box of these in the mail from Built Bar, so thank you, Built Bar. Appreciate that. From the people who invented healthy and tasty comes the latest gift to your taste buds, and these are definitely a gift to your taste buds. The coconut brownie chunk bars, the Built Puff bars, are absolutely delicious. You need to try them. That's right, the coconut brownie chunk Built Bar, flavor you love in a deliciously chewy, marshmallowy, covered in 100% real chocolate. It's like a fluffy cloud of coconut brownie goodness. All Built Bars are made with collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits. Eat something that tastes good and is good for you. The best part about Built Puff, of course, is they taste amazing, but you can enjoy them guilt-free because they're actually good for you. They're the perfect treat even when you've got a craving. Delicious coconut, rich, sweet brownie, creamy marshmallow. Stop fantasizing. Get to Built.com to order your box of coconut brownie chunk Built Puffs right now. Go to Built.com. Use promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCK15 at Built.com.
So on the field, for Orlando Brown's absence as they start training camp. Now, later this week, rookies and quarterbacks will report, and then on the 26th will be the rest of the roster. We won't see tackles during that time. That's fine, except for Kennard, right? And I don't know who he's going to go against other than Karlaftis. Be a lot of one-on-ones that first week.
And either rookies or first-year players, I think, can go.
Right. So it's going to be a lot of Kennard versus Karlaftis one-on-one because ain't nobody else going to be around. And that's okay. But long-term, if you go into the week, Veterans Report Orlando's not there. Jaron Christian took most of the top team one reps at left tackle during OTAs. Wiley Kennard traded off at right tackle. That seems like the easiest transition to make. If there's any change in that, I think that gives us kind of a rebalance point that, maybe Christian was getting those reps to see what he had, and we've done our evaluation of OTA film, and we're going to start somebody else there for now, and we'll see what happens. I feel like this offensive line is going to have to be kind of like feeling itself out at the tackles for the first week or two of camp. Am I wrong, or what do you see?
No, I definitely see that. I think that they've got to get figured out what they're going to be able to do. And really, OTAs show you what people could do and maybe a little bit of their drop, their kick step and that kind of thing. But it still doesn't really give you a great feel for what one of those players can do on the field because pads aren't on. They're not really going against people one-on-one. So camp is really going to be the prove it time. And that's when you're going to see who's there and who's doing what and what player is taking reps where. I think it's going to be very interesting to see who they try out at left tackle if Brown isn't there.
If there's more than just Jaron Christian, I'll be a little bit surprised. I think they want to try to get some continuity at that point. But then the question comes up is, how are you going to augment the roster? You mentioned something about rescinding the tag earlier. if they decide that, hey, this is just not a good negotiation that's ever going to come to fruition, that's like a nuclear option. But if you rescind that tag, you get that cap space back.
Yep.
And then you can do your trades for pass rushers or whatever else that they're trying to accomplish. I cannot see that happening, the nuclear option. Can you?
No, I really don't. I don't think they're able to. I don't think they want to go that direction, because that is. You're absolutely right. It's a nuclear option, but you're also sitting there in a position where you're basically saying, okay, we don't need a top maybe 15 left tackle in the NFL. We're going to go with a guy that's maybe top 45. Is that really the position you want to put Mahomes in?
No.
So to me, I don't think it's really an option. I do think that it's possible that they're going to continue to have some kind of talks, and maybe he's going to try to get them to say, I'm not showing up until I get a guarantee that I can't be franchised next year. I don't think Kansas City should do that either.
No, and they certainly don't have to.
Yeah, but the problem is that then you're still sitting in a situation where Christian may be your left tackle. The only other option I could possibly see, and again, I don't think it's that big of an option. I don't see it happening. Is that maybe some left tackle candidate ends up on the trade block that they don't expect and they like him better, and maybe you can go make a trade for somebody and rescind the tag on Brown. I don't see that happening because left tackles generally aren't going to get traded, but
right,
that's really the only thing I'm going to see. I could really see.
Agreed. In the end, Orlando Brown plays for this team in 2022. I think he plays all 17 games in terms of, like, I think he'll show up for week 1. I think he'll be in camp. We'll see what happens. I was optimistic about the deal, so who knows? But
my question is he going to show up early enough to be effective week 1?
Right.
And really, when it comes to me looking at the player and me looking at the perspective of signing him long term, he needs to show he's a professional and understand that it's a business. Yeah, he wants the money, but the only way he's going to get the money now is to prove it. And if you're not willing to show up and prove it, then maybe Kansas City doesn't sign him long term. Maybe they franchise him one more year and then they find somebody in the draft next year. It's not the way I would want to go, but he may not give you the choice. If he's not going to prove that he can grow and be smart about business decisions, which is what this is, I don't know that you want him here long term.
We're going to find out. Report day is coming. We'll see what we get leaked out this week. Folks, get prepared. We will have everything for you. Tomorrow, we're doing our top 5 offensive surprises. Don't miss that show. Matt and Derek will be back with us later in the week as we go through prep for rookies and quarterbacks to report. We'll get you all that information. Thanks for listening to us today, and we will talk to you tomorrow.